He constantly made us chuckle. He gained notoriety for his outrageous white hair, amusing facial expressions, and that memorable banjo. Behind the laughs and the celebrity, Steve has had many hardships. He was excellent in every film, from The Jerk to Father of the Bride. In ways that are not evident in interviews, he has experienced loneliness, lost loved ones, and dealt with family issues. His life has changed significantly since he was everywhere, and he is now 79 years old. Come along as we examine Steve Martin's life in further detail and attempt to understand why it is so depressing. Initially, there was a young man from Texas who had ambitious intentions. On August 14, 1945, she was born in Waco, Texas. His name is Stephen Glenn Martin. His father, Vernon Martin, attempted to pursue a career in acting while working as a real estate agent. While working outside the home, his mother, Mary Lee, reared Steve and his sister, Melinda. When Steve was still a child, the family relocated to California. They first resided in Englewood. They then relocated to Garden Grove, a peaceful city in Orange County. As a child, Steve attended church with his Baptist family. He even cheered in high school. Steve's first recollection is of seeing his father take a little role in a film. If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to like, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more amazing content. And hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. Now, back to the topic. What we were talking about was, as an extra at a theater in Hollywood, Glenn poured beverages on stage. That little piece taught Steve a lot, and he was young at the time. Acting runs in the family, as evidenced by Glenn's involvement in a play while in Britain during World War II. Glenn and Steve, meanwhile, were not particularly close. Glenn had no idea how to love. He donated things like automobiles and bikes, but he kept his feelings to himself. Steve previously claimed that his father was the person he detested the most as a teenager. In his autobiography Born Standing Up, Steve discussed referring to his father as Glenn, rather than Dad. That gives us a good idea of their distance. He recalled being asked to play catch in the front yard by Glenn. Since it didn't happen very often, Steve wasn't sure what to do. However, Steve recalls that his father was generous to others, often lending him money, and paying for Steve's comic book subscriptions. Despite his writing, we throw the ball back and forth with dull formality. However, Glenn also appeared irritated that Steve was succeeding. Glenn simply remarked after watching Steve's popular film The Jerk, "Well, he's not Charlie Chaplin." Steve always believed that his father was disappointed that his own aspirations to play were not fulfilled while his son achieved fame. He had an extremely amazing first job. There was a beautiful setting for Steve Martin's first employment. In 1955, at the age of 10, he started working at Disneyland. The adventure park had just debuted that summer. Steve rode his bike there and was employed to sell guidebooks. He sold each one for 25 cents and kept 10 cents from each sale. He felt good about earning $2 after putting in a lot of effort throughout the day. However, they weren't the first to market guidebooks. After the morning bustle, Steve had time to explore the park. Things became truly wonderful at that point. In Merlin's magic store, he spent hours learning how to perform tricks and watching others perform them. By 1960, he had mastered many magic feats and even secured a position at the Fantasyland shop. He gained knowledge there that went beyond simply persuading someone to remove a coin from their ear. He discovered how to grab people's interest, make them laugh, and pique their curiosity. He also picked up balloon animal antics and spinning. Later on, he would employ all of these abilities in his stand-up comedy. He was influenced by Wally Bogue, a singer at the Golden Horseshoe Revue. Is there a little lad in the crowd who could fill in for him? One day, when Wally became ill, the stage manager would inquire. That concept made Steve desire to be on stage even though it didn't happen. This is an intriguing fact as well. While working at Disneyland, Steve appeared in the backdrop of a home video that was ultimately edited into the short film Disneyland Dream. His first film appearance was a coincidental one. Even then, the lights seemed to find him. Anything from college ideas to magic tricks. in order for Steve to attend college following high school. He enrolled in writing and theatrical classes. In his spare time, he and his buddy Kathy Westmoreland visited the Birdcage Theater. Together, they do short comedic shows. At Knott's Berry Farm, Steve also joined a group of people who were laughing. It was around this period that he encountered Stormy Shirk, a young girl. They began going on dates and singing together. Stormy encouraged Steve to enroll at California State University in Long Beach. His major was thought. That may seem like a strange choice for a comic book in the future, but it greatly influenced his behavior. Steve's house was far from Stormy's school, UCLA. They lived far apart, which made their relationship difficult, and eventually they moved away. However, Steve's life was altered during his time at college. He once remarked, "It changed everything I believe and think." He enjoyed the strangeness and twisted nature of philosophical concepts. He saw beauty in non sequiturs, or concepts that don't seem to make sense. His perspective on cause and effect changed as a result of studying philosophy. He thought about the same problems and came up with a pretty original method to be amusing. To illustrate how important philosophy was to him, he said, "If you study geology, which is all facts, you forget it all the next day. But philosophy, you remember just enough to mess you up for the rest of your life." He didn't want to adhere to comedy conventions. He pondered, what if there were no punchlines? What if I built tension but never let it go? He read a comedy book about this period that altered his perspective. This thought became part of his act. He would set up a joke and then carry it in a different direction. What if I headed for a climax, but all I delivered was an anticlimax? He asked himself. People continued to be astonished, and that surprise turned into laughter. A significant decision and a new route. Steve Martin changed his major to theater and transferred to UCLA by 1967. He even scored a date with Dina Martin when he made an appearance on an episode of The Dating Game. He began to perform at local clubs at night. Despite the conflicting feedback, he persisted. He was experimenting with his own thoughts and voice rather than attempting to win over everyone. Steve made a significant step at age 21. He left college early. He felt prepared to pursue comedy full-time since he had seen and learned enough. He had a difficult early career. He wasn't famous right away. He was unique, though, since he brought something fresh to the stage. He didn't depend on easy stories or jokes. He created something strange and amazing by applying all he had studied, from academic philosophy to Disneyland magic. Steve did not fit the stereotype of a comic. Perhaps that's precisely why he rose to prominence as one of the most well-known comedians of his era. It wasn't all fun and laughing throughout his early years. It was full of complex feelings, a difficult connection with his father, and the kind of introspection that most people don't associate with a humorous man. However, all of those aspects of his life combined to create the Steve Martin that the world would eventually know and respect. The dramatic ascent to fame via stand-up. Steve Martin's ascent to fame wasn't straightforward or predictable. He began his comedy career modestly but soon rose to prominence as one of the nation's most well-liked performers. His major break initially came from writing. Nina Goldblatt, his ex-girlfriend, showed his work to Mason Williams, the chief writer of the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour. Mason paid Steve out of pocket solely to get him on board because he loved what he saw. It was a wise choice. At the age of 23, Steve became a member of the writing team and went on to win an Emmy in 1969. He then wrote for the Sonny and Cher Comedy Hour and the Glen Campbell Good Time Hour. In 1968, he had his first national appearance, but he later made fun of his ungainly appearance. He said his clothing were way too nice and his hair was like a helmet. He added, "I had absolutely no authority," and acknowledged that after seeing himself, he felt depressed for a week. He shared housing with other entertainers at this period, including Gary Muir, who even assisted him in crafting his first joke. Steve served as an opening act for Toto and the Carpenters. In 1976, he received another Emmy nomination for Van Dyke and Company for his efforts as a TV writer. Then Saturday Night Live, the true star, arrived. His cameos were so well received that each time he appeared, the show's viewership increased. He became good friends with the cast, particularly Gilda Radner, and hosted Saturday Night Live 16 times. Steve, who hosted that night's event, released a heartwarming video of them together when she died of cancer. Hit comedy CDs were the result of this fame. Even more successful was Steve Martin's debut album, A Wild and Crazy Guy, which debuted his silly, wild, and crazy guy persona and peaked at number 2 on the charts. He sang the humorous song, King Tut, which peaked at number 17 on the charts and sold over 1 million copies, on Saturday Night Live amid the Egyptian mania that accompanied the album's conclusion. Grammys were won by both albums. Steve's humor was clever, strange, and frequently ridiculed conventional stand-up, but it wasn't simply for laughs. His blend of sharp and humorous was lauded by critics. He was developing a brand new form of comedy, not just another comedian. He quickly had thousands of admirers filling stadiums thanks to his distinctive flair. His trademark appearance was a white suit, which he donned on stage so that everyone could see him. However, he gave up stand-up in 1981, when he was at the height of his popularity. He simply quit without saying anything. Years later, he told me, "My act was conceptual. It was completed after the notion was clarified and understood by all." He believed there was nowhere else to take it. There were too many people and the presentation was too tightly controlled. He missed having fresh experiences. It was time for a change, and the best way to do that was with movies. He needed to remain himself. Being in movies had always been Steve Martin's true ambition. He gave up stand-up and focused entirely on acting. His first minor role was in Another Nice Mess in 1972. In 1977, his short film, The Absent-Minded Waiter, received an Academy Award nomination. He played in it and wrote in it. Then, in 1979, he co-wrote and starred in The Jerk. It earned over $100 million and was a huge hit. This created space for additional jobs. He took the serious film Pennies from Heaven very seriously, learning how to act and even how to tap dance. Unfortunately, that film did not perform well at the box office. But he didn't stop. Over the following decade, he starred in numerous popular films, such as Planes, Trains, The Man with Two Brains, All of Me, Three Amigos, and Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid. In the roles he played, he displayed both his humorous and serious sides. In one film, he was loud and crazy, and in another, he was quiet and kind. In the 1990s and early 2000s, he rose to fame as a family member actor. He portrayed stressed-out fathers who loved their children in Father of the Bride and Cheaper by the Dozen. His characters were more nuanced now, but they were still humorous. He was more than just the crazy guy anymore. He and the people who watched him had both grown up. Movies like Looney Tunes, Back in Action and Bringing Down the House kept coming out with him in them. He went back to his singing roots, though. His tours with Martin Short since 2015 have mixed comedy and singing. They put out a Netflix special in 2018 called An Evening You Will Forget for the Rest of Your Life. It was nominated for 4 Emmys. Then there was another twist, TV again. He created and acted in the Hulu show Only Murders in the Building with Martin Short and Selena Gomez in 2021. A lot of people liked it, and he was nominated for 3 Emmys, 2 Screen Actors Guild Awards, a Golden Globe, and even a Peabody Award. The fact that the 3 of them went back to SNL in 2022 showed how close Steve was to the show even then. Steve did more than just act, though. He also wrote the scripts for Bright Star and Meteor Shower, 2 Broadway shows. He helped write the music for Bright Star too. He also never lost his love for the banjo. He put out bluegrass records and played live with many different bands. He won 3 Grammys for his singing, in addition to the 2 he already had for comedy. A friendship that would last forever. One of the nicest ties in Hollywood is between Steve Martin and Martin Short. They met for the first time on the set of Three Amigos. They had never worked together before that. Martin Short was shocked by how fancy Steve's house was when he first went there. He mentioned there were Hoppers and Picassos on the wall. He then made light of her money by asking, "How did you get that rich?" She replied, "Because I've seen your work." That meeting turned into something amazing. Short noted in an interview that most artists work together on a movie and then don't see each other again. It was different with Steve, though. "Steve and I made each other laugh," he stated. And that made them want to keep seeing each other. Over the course of more than 30 years, they've been friends and gone on family holidays together. Steve was startled to learn how many people loved Three Amigos many years later. They finally told him how much the movie meant to people when Empire magazine asked to do a 25th anniversary cover photo. That moment made him think of how amazing their job was and how close they were. Something scary happened that night and changed everything. There were a number of drug users in the 1970s, both in entertainment and music. Steve Martin, on the other hand, stayed away from that world. He spoke about an occurrence that scared him for life in his book Born Standing Up. He smoked weed with several pals one night before going to the movies. He claimed that it was an essential component of his diet and that he did it constantly. But things were different that night. "I felt my mind being torn from its present location," he stated to me. He grew frightened. The sensation persisted. His heart was pounding rapidly. He thought he was about to suffer a heart attack. He nearly ended up in the hospital. The following day, the fear returned when he attempted to explain what had happened. He then learned it wasn't a heart attack. A panic attack occurred. He didn't take cocaine or LSD at all, and he told NPR, "It kept me from drugs." Even aspirin scared him after that. He avoided using drugs like so many of his buddies did because of that one night. There was more than fear. That decision altered his subsequent style of living and working. The brilliance of John Candy and a sequence that still brings tears to my eyes. When Steve Martin worked on the film's Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, his career peaked. It's now a holiday staple, but it was enhanced by working with John Candy. When the film celebrated its 35th anniversary, Steve spoke about it. He said, "We laughed a lot, but they made sure to laugh before filming so they could stay focused during the actual scenes. They were comfortable with each other and truly liked one another. He would make me laugh," he stated. "But the happiness of that movie also makes me sad." Neither John Candy nor the director, John Hughes, lived long enough to witness the film's success. Some of the film's best moments were unplanned, they came from moments on set. John Candy added a pivotal scene near the end, and Steve said he still gets emotional watching it years later. The film resonated with so many people because it was honest, both in their friendship and in their performances. It wasn't just funny, it had heart, and that came from two men who cared about each other on and off screen. Steve Martin made comedy look easy, but it wasn't, and he quit due to the pressure. He told NPR that his 4 big years in stand-up came after 14 years of hard work. "Thank goodness, persistence is a great replacement for talent," he said in his book, demonstrating his level of effort even in the face of setbacks. He was on the Merv Griffin show once. He mentioned purchasing a Greyhound bus, but Steve halted when Merv questioned why it was a bus. "I was at a loss for words and just stared at him." He recalled that moment haunted him. Martin Short told a story in 2022 about how Steve continues to put in more preparation than anyone else. Steve was already honing his gags when he received the invitation to appear on Jimmy Kimmel Live 2 months away. "That's why he's Steve Martin. That's why he's still Steve Martin," said Short. So many people were anticipating the hits, and Steve reached a breaking point when he had to perform in 85 cities in 90 days and maintain the same show every night. He was locked up, he had to eat room service alone, he had to travel with security. He claimed that he was depressed because he was bored and tired of creating art, and then the show that changed everything happened. When he was in the hospital, a nurse asked him to sign a printout of his heartbeat, and that's when it hit him: "I was becoming like the Wiener Mobile, a commercial artifact." He was no longer living a normal life, he was simply a part of a machine, and he quit stand-up. There was no farewell tour or big announcement, he simply stopped prioritizing his art over fame. Steve Martin is well known for his love of art. He's a serious collector with many famous works in his collection. But in 2011, his name came up in one of the biggest art fraud cases in history. The painting in question was Landschaft mit Pferden, or Landscape with Horses. It was said to be a 1915 piece by the German artist Heinrich Campenden. Steve bought it from a gallery in Paris in 2004. He paid around €700,000, which is more than $850,000. The painting was so well done that it fooled art experts and passed as real. Just over a year later, he sold the painting at a Christie's auction for €500,000, taking a big loss. But it wasn't until much later that the truth came out. It was a fake. The painting had come from a German art forgery ring led by Wolfgang Beltracchi. This group had tricked many people by mixing real paintings with fake ones and creating believable backstories. Steve told the New York Times, "Each time you become more and more cautious," he added. The fakes were quite clever. They gave it a long provenance and faked labels. Steve only learned the truth years after he had already sold the painting. It was a reminder that even smart collectors can be fooled. And for Steve, it wasn't even the first time it happened. Fighting fears and facing regret. Steve Martin has always seemed calm and funny on the outside. But for many years, he quietly struggled with deep fear. It all started when he was young. At Disneyland's Golden Horseshoe, he was watching a stand-up comic perform when he suddenly fainted. Doctors later said it was a heart murmur, something called a prolapsed mitral valve. While that's usually not serious, hearing it as a kid scared him badly. In his book, Born Standing Up, Steve said that this moment planted a seed of hypochondria that poisonously bloomed years later. He lived in fear for many years, always worried something was wrong with his health. But in 2017, he opened up about how that fear slowly faded as he grew older. In an interview with AARP, he said, "I worried all these years that I was going to die, and I never did." He was able to cease fretting constantly after coming to that straightforward realization. Additionally, he stated, "You do get smarter.